Welcome to Candlewick Library. I'm Cheryl. In my recent December wrap-up video, I said that I would go over what my favorite books of 2024 were. So I'm going to do that in this video. I did a battle of the books at the end of my reading journal last year. There were some months where it was hard to pick a favorite because I liked them, but I didn't have any that really stood out as a best book of the year. And then there were other months where there were many that could have been the favorite of the month. I enjoyed doing the battle of the books enough that I'm going to do it again this year. I don't know if it tells the whole story of the favorite books, because if I'm picking one book in one month over another book that could have been a favorite a different month, and then picking one a different month that I didn't like as much as that one. So I wrote down what I put as my favorite book every month, and then a couple of my honorable mentions. Also, I never pick one that is a reread. I always pick my favorite of the month that is a new book to me. So I also have books that were rereads that would have been a favorite of the month or a favorite of the year. So I'm going to just go through those. I will mention the honorable mentions and the rereads. In January, I picked my favorite book as A Beautiful Disguise by Roseanna M. White. I hadn't read a book in that genre that was quite like that at that point. It really stuck out to me as something interesting and unique. So I really enjoyed it. I had a really fun time reading it. But now, at this point, looking back, I actually think that I should have picked A Scarlet Pimpernel for this, because Scarlet Pimpernel was the very first book I read of January of 2024, and I really loved it. So much more than I thought I was going to. And I guess it's just this many months later, when I look back at the two, that actually is the one that I think of enjoying more. So I would put both of those. Beautiful Disguise, Scarlet Pimpernel is the honorable mention, but really it probably was the favorite of the month. In February, I put Hope Between the Pages by Pepper Basham as my favorite of the month. And then I would say that an honorable mention would be The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes. That was one of the collections of short stories that I really enjoyed. In March, my favorite was The Boy on the Wooden Box. This was a memoir of the author's time as a young Jewish boy in World War II. He was one of the people that was saved by Oskar Schindler. That was a really meaningful book. I actually read it twice in 2024, once by myself and once aloud to my daughters, and both times I absolutely loved it. Probably the honorable mention would be the first City Spies book. They are very simply written, but I find them very enjoyable. I've liked the whole series so far, and that was when I read the very first book, and I really enjoyed it. So then I had to pick between those 3 months, my favorite of those 3 months, and I picked Hope Between the Pages. Then in April, I read Set in Stone, and this was the book that had paleontology, and I liked this so much better than the first one that had come out, I think, the year before. If you watch my channel a lot, you know that I really love archaeology and paleontology and dinosaurs, and so that was a book that really was fun for me to read. In May, my favorite book was Lady's Guide to Marvels and Misadventures. It felt like a combination of Nutcracker meets Around the World in 80 Days, but also a unique feel to it. And it was so much fun. I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed the characters. My honorable mention would be a really short nonfiction from John MacArthur called Found God's Will. In June, I put my favorite of the month as City Spies, City of the Dead. And I believe that was the third or the fourth in the series. And I did really enjoy it. However, that would not be a favorite over other books from other months. That's one of the ones I'm talking about. The other favorite books that month were rereads. I reread Jurassic Park that month, and I reread the first Harry Potter that month. Those would both be the favorites of the whole 3-month period, let alone that month. Since I don't count those as the absolute favorite, they have to be honorable mentions. And so for April, May, and June, I put my favorite book as Lady's Guide to Marvels and Misadventures. In July, I put my favorite book as The Extraordinary Deaths of Mrs. Kipp. And then in August, there were quite a few books I really loved in August, but I put my favorite as The Literary Allusions in Harry Potter. This was a book that really went through a lot of the different themes in Harry Potter, the Harry Potter series, that point to other books and poetry and myths and legends and religious things. An honorable mention would be Wormwood Abbey. I really loved Wormwood Abbey. It was such a fun new fantasy book. I'm excited to go on with that series. In September, my favorite was Once Upon a Prince. A close second was The Secrets of Pembroke Park. And then also a reread of Harry Potter, the third Harry Potter I read that month. And so that one would have probably been the favorite had I picked a reread. For the July, August, September 3-month period of time, I picked The Extraordinary Deaths of Mrs. Kipp as the favorite. In October, I picked The Return of Sherlock Holmes as the favorite book. And that was, again, another collection of short stories. And then my Honorable mention for that would be The Portent, which was one story in George MacDonald's Twilight collection. That one was a very long one. Most of the stories in there were really short, but that one felt more like a novella. It was a very long one, and I really enjoyed that one. In November, Across the Ages was my favorite, and an honorable mention would probably be In This Moment, the second book in the Timeless series. And then in December, my favorite book was Of Golden Shadows by Michelle Griepe. I really loved the Egypt archaeology feel to this book. I thought it was one of her best ones so far. And an honorable mention would be Well Lived by Sally Clarkson. This was a memoir of her time in Oxford. It had some really great pictures of Oxford. But then again, there were some rereads that would have been a favorite, and that's the fourth Harry Potter and Little Christmas Carol. Technically wasn't a reread because it was A Christmas Carol, but they were made into animals. But there was only a few words that were changed to do that, and so I still kind of counted it as a reread of A Christmas Carol. For October, November, and December, I picked Across the Ages as the favorite in that time period. When I took each 3-month period, it left the last book to be decided between Lady's Guide to Marvels and Misadventures and Across the Ages, which surprised me. But those were the two that were in the final, and so I picked Across the Ages by Gabrielle Meyer. I would love to hear what your favorite book of the year was, and if you enjoyed any of these ones that I've mentioned.